So Simple tutorial. Good morning students. Welcome to SST So Simple tutorial. Dear students, today we are going to start lesson 1 Cold War era of class 12 political science book Contemporary World Politics. As the name suggests, this book basically deals with world politics as it is today. So, you will get to know what is happening outside and, of course, about India's relations with them. Cold War, dear students, is a very good starting point to begin with. It will not be possible to understand present day politics without an understanding of the Cold War. In fact, it is the end of the Cold War that is usually seen as the beginning of the contemporary era in world politics. But before I begin, I suggest all of you to keep your map book along and use it every time whether you are reading history or political science. This will help you in better understanding of the topic. For example, if I say Cuba, going with the Soviet Union was not liked by the Americans. Now this statement will not make any impact on you unless you see the geographical location of the US and Cuba. Unless you see the map, you will not realize how this was a security threat to America. So map is necessary. Besides, you should also watch the graphics and illustrations given in the book. These visuals stay in our mind for a long time and help us to remember the places or events easily. Okay, so let us begin. Just recall the Second World War. The Second World War was fought between two blocs, the Allies and the Axis powers. The Allies included mainly Britain, France, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. The Axis powers included mainly Nazi Germany, Japan and Italy. It broke out in 1939 and came to an end in 1945. What was the result of this war? The Second World War resulted in the victory of the Allied powers. The Axis powers were defeated badly. How did the war end? The war ended with the surrender of Germany in May 1945 and the unconditional surrender of Japan in the month of August following the US dropping of atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On the map, you can locate both Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. They are located in the southernmost part of the island of Japan. You can also see the model of atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945. It was codenamed Little Boy. The other one is the replica of the Fat Man that was dropped over Nagasaki on 9th of August 1945. See these pictures of clouds, generally called mushroom clouds, that were formed after the bombs were dropped over the two cities by the US. My dear students, this war was fought not only in Europe but was spread out to regions outside Europe, including Southeast Asia, China, Burma and parts of India's northeast. This was the most destructive of all the wars that were fought before. The death and destruction were enormous. At least 60 million people are believed to have been killed directly or indirectly as a result of this war. Millions more were injured. Besides the loss of human lives, this war is also remembered for the economic loss and destruction. Let us now try to understand the consequences of war. Dear students, after the war, a new balance of power was established. The leadership of the world slipped from the hands of England and came into the hands of the US and the USSR. The USA and the USSR emerged as the two superpowers. This is in brief about the Second World War that you are in fact aware of. Let us now move further. Okay. Students, the end of the Second World War was also the beginning of the Cold War. Critics of the US decision to drop atom bombs argue that when the US knew that Japan was about to surrender, then it was not necessary to drop the bombs. That means it was intended to stop the Soviet Union from making military and political gains in Asia and elsewhere. That also means it was intended to show Moscow that the United States was supreme. On the other hand, the supporters of the US argue that the dropping of bombs was necessary to end the war quickly and to stop further loss of Americans and Allied lives. Whatever be the motives, the end result was the rise of the two new powers on the globe and the beginning of Cold War. America and the Soviet Union, who were friends, who were fighting from the same side during the war, became rivals in political sphere, and a competition arose between them to assume the leadership of the world. So, what is this Cold War? Let us see. The Cold War, my dear students, was a state of conflict, tensions, and a series of confrontations between the United States and the Soviet Union backed by their allies. But it was not a state of armed struggle. It was a state in which the rivals, while maintaining their peacetime diplomatic relations, continued their hostility. They used all means other than war to weaken each other. It was a kind of verbal war, fought through newspapers, radios, and other propaganda methods. So, Cold War was not a war, it was an atmosphere of war, even more terrible than a hot war. I hope this is understood by you all. Now, what you need to understand is that whether the Cold was simply a matter of power rivalry of military alliances and of the balance of power. No, it was not so. It was also accompanied by the ideological differences between the two nations as well. America is a capitalist, liberal democratic country, whereas Russia is a communist, one party state. Hence, naturally, there can never be harmony between the two as the fundamental principles of these countries are just contrary to each other. Some historians view that the Cold War began with the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. After the success of Bolshevik Revolution, Russia tried to propagate the ideology of the revolution to the rest of the world. The Allied powers did not like this idea at all. They wanted that the Soviet government of Bolsheviks should be abolished by all means. That is why, if you remember, when civil war broke out post Bolshevik revolution, that is from 1918 to 1922, European powers had supported the anti-revolutionary forces. Understood? Okay. Before the bomb was dropped in Japan, dear students, America had maintained this secret from Stalin. Russia had never expected that the US would hide the secret of atom bomb from her. This also alarmed Russia about her own security. However, soon Soviet Union also conducted her nuclear tests in 1949. So now both these superpowers were holding nuclear weapons. They had the capacity to destroy each other. But at the same time, both of them were also aware of the magnitude of destruction that these weapons would cause. They understood well the price that they would have to pay in case of nuclear attack on each other. Thus, none of the sides wanted to take the risk. Hence, in such a situation, a full-fledged war was unlikely to happen. My dear students, this negative motivation is called the logic of deterrence. The word deterrence has come from the word deter. To deter means to discourage or prevent from doing something. So, in the logic of deterrence, one actor prevents another from taking some action by raising fear in the latter, the consequences that will ensure. In simple words, if you want to hit someone, you know that he will hit you back with the same force and then cause damage of the same magnitude. So, deterrence is basically a strategy for combining two competing goals. One, countering the enemy, and second, avoiding war. This concept is very simple. An enemy will not strike if it knows that the defender can defeat the attack or can inflict unacceptable damage in retaliation. This is what was happening here. Both the US and the USSR had the capacity to retaliate against the nuclear attack and cause destruction to each other. But none of them wanted to initiate the war. Thus, the Cold War, in spite of being an intense form of military rivalry between great powers, remained cold and did not turn hot. It never got converted into a full fledged war. The logic of deterrence thus could not stop the rivalry, but it prevented a full fledged war. Thank God, good sense prevailed in the two superpowers. They acted rationally and responsibly as they understood the risk of another world war. This is how the Cold War managed to ensure human survival and avoided destruction. This is all about students, a general idea about the Cold War. I hope all of you must have understood it. In the next class, we shall read the Cuban Missile Crisis. Till then, keep reading and have a nice time. Thank you.